Welcome to the Remarkable Retail Podcast, Season 3, Episode 11. This one's going to 11, Steve.
Ooh.
I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
You know, Steve, I wanted to start this episode by reminding our viewers and our listeners to subscribe. Subscribe to our podcast on their favorite platform and smash that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Now, why do you think I'm mentioning this right off the top? Well, of course, it's because of our very special guest, Robbie Kalman-Baxter, the guru around subscriptions and membership program.
Yeah, it's a nice segue. So well played.
Thank you. Here's one of her books. She's got two books, right? And
yes,
The Forever Transaction. And you brought her to my attention. She's in your book, right? You mentioned her and the whole subscription thing in your book, right? Part of being remarkable, right?
Yeah, I ran into her work. I think it was on doing the second edition of the book, and in the chapter on Essential Number 7, Memorable, where I go through a list of ways to be memorable. One of them is to build a membership or subscription model, as well as the so-called Rundle, recurring revenue stream. So, yeah, she really, as we talk about in the interview, it's not like clubs or membership or loyalty programs or subscriptions are new, but the way they have gone to a whole new level, I think both as thinking about it from a strategy standpoint and solving a broader set of customer issues, but the technology to do these things. And I think retailers' appreciation of having that direct relationship with the customer, having the data and being able to leverage it. So yeah, it's just gone to a whole new level. So I'm glad that I went down that rabbit hole a little bit in the book. And then, it's great to have her on.
Yeah, it's a great interview. And as we talked about, it's been around since Columbia House. There's nothing new ostensibly, but there's far more interesting things to talk around strategy and membership. And so we'll get to that interview right after. Of course, we start with what's on your mind with the news. Let's start with this BBY new membership program. What's going on there?
Well, this is also a nice coincidence, but Best Buy announced this week a new membership program, which I think is called Total Tech, something like that. It's $199.95 a year, and there's a whole bundle of benefits. The one that kind of got the most play in the news is this special access to difficult to find products, which in light of the supply chain challenges is I guess more newsworthy. But there's a set of things: free shipping and installation, free delivery, longer delivery windows, special deals, a number of things that are really kind of layered, or a whole new layer of things on top of some of the benefits they had tied to their credit card and things like that. So, so that it's pretty interesting. Follows very much in terms of what we talk about in the interview. Seemed to be pretty well received by the analyst community in Wall Street. So they've been testing it, I guess, for a while, and now they're rolling it out.
Well, and having myself run a big loyalty program at Hudson's Bay, these premium loyalty programs, they're a real thing. The Hudson's Bay and the earlier iterations of Best Buy programs were free. You just signed up and you did stuff and you got points and you did whatever. But these premium loyalty programs, ostensibly starting with Costco through to, of course, Prime, they're a thing, right? These outsized benefits, pay some money, do some math, and figure that's going to be pretty good. I think they lucked in, so to speak, to the supply chain issue. I think that's opportunistic.
Right. Very opportunistic. What did you feel? But yeah, when I worked on redoing the Encircle loyalty program at Neiman Marcus, which was 14, 15 years ago now, it's been a long time. One of the things we did was really study the different tiering approaches that different loyalty programs took. And so that program is not a paid, you don't pay to move up the tiers, you spend. So you pay in a different way to move up the tiers. Yeah, but I think there's a lot. I mean, some of it is just good customer segmentation. There are customers that will value that access or whatever kind of exclusive benefits you might have. But a lot of people just aspire, right, to get to that next level, whether it's our airline status or a retailer's program or any number of ways. So yeah,
Hmm.
it's just as we talked about with Robbie, I think it's this intersection of better customer understanding as well as now having the tools to do it, and so a lot of new ideas just kind of taken to a whole new level.
For me, it reminds me of what you and I have been talking about around innovation that's going to happen post COVID. Like, COVID era in retail in my mind was let's get through it. Whether let's just get stuff on the shelf, let's get
Yeah,
people hired, let's keep our people safe, let's keep our customers safe. Let's just get through it. And now we're coming out the back end, and I think that there's going to be a lot of people who've been doing a lot of thinking about innovation with their, in their
yeah,
PJs as they go to work. I think that we're going to have some really interesting days.
yeah. I hope so.
Speaking, yeah, speaking of interesting days, our friends at Macy's have been up to some shenanigans, or at least some folks who have investments in Macy's want them to do some shenanigans. What's going on there?
Yeah, so I feel like we may be getting this story every few weeks. So this investment group is pressuring, encouraging, perhaps is a nicer way of saying it, that Macy's should consider doing a Saks, spinning off its e-commerce business from its physical store business. And
Yeah.
we've talked about this. I think generally speaking, those in the financial community think this is genius. Take advantage of the growth in e-commerce,
Yeah.
take advantage of the really kind of crazy multiples, in my opinion, on .com
Yeah.
businesses, and kind of
What could go
strike.
wrong? What could go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong, right? But it really fights against this whole narrative of the channels blurring and
Yeah.
the recognition that customers shop in both channels. So I think from a strategy standpoint, a business strategy, long-term perspective, it's nuts. I don't get it at all. From a financial markets, being opportunistic and perhaps
Hmm.
not having any better ideas on how to improve your business performance, this could happen. But
Yeah.
I don't think Macy's has
Yeah. Yeah.
responded formally. But I think given the pressures that are out there, and given stagnant performance, who knows? Maybe they'll pursue it.
Yeah, I got to think it's not a new idea for the folks at Macy's. I mean, when the department stores, like the Saks and Hudson's Bay start to do the spin, they start asking themselves if they weren't already, is this a 1+1 = 3 for us? So I'm sure it's not a new idea. I'm just,
Well,
it's just
and
a bit
yeah,
of,
the investment bankers are knocking on their door. Like it's yeah,
yeah,
so it's not.
yeah.
I'm sure it's not as if they hadn't thought about it or aren't thinking about it.
Yeah, I wonder if they've knocked on the door and the door didn't open, or they told them to go away. So they said, all right, we'll get you at
Right.
recess. We're going to put out a press release, like,
Yeah,
anyway, so it's just
wouldn't be the first
kind of
time.
shenanigans. So, some other interesting news between some two big players, Home Depot and Walmart. And if I get this right, Walmart is going to be doing deliveries for Home Depot. Do I have that right?
That's right. Walmart has this program called Go Local, which is basically a last mile delivery program.
Mm,
And they have started to offer it as a service to other retailers. It's not clear how many other customers they have because there's a sense that there are a bunch of smaller retailers, kind of like if Fulfilled by Amazon
yeah.
concept. This is Fulfilled by Walmart, but
Mm,
with local delivery drivers. But Home Depot is, as far as we know, the first big retailer to sign up for it. So I think it's interesting for a couple reasons. One is, which is probably a whole other episode. I just feel like the same day, next day delivery wars just continue to escalate. And
mm.
Amazon has been obviously kind of raising the stakes on this for a
Instigator.
while.
Yeah.
And they
Hmm.
have hundreds of, I forget the exact number, but they have facilities that are positioned such that they can do same day, next day delivery, and they have their own vehicles, and then these flex drivers that do delivery. So a lot of retailers are being compelled, I guess, to figure out how to better do next day, same day delivery, but they don't have the infrastructure necessarily. So they've been mostly leveraging their stores and putting together
Mm.
these local delivery drivers. So that's a strategy of Walmart's in general, and it's interesting that Home Depot is signing up to do this instead of kind of building up their capacity. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see both
Hmm.
how much more activity happens on the part of these big retailers to develop these capabilities, I also think it's just interesting to look at Walmart because they're starting to operate more as kind of a platform business
Mm,
with their marketplace and with
yeah.
some of these other services. So
Hmm.
more to come there, I suspect. But it's a pretty interesting move.
Yeah, pretty interesting. So here in Canada, we had some unfortunate news with someone I know. Mark McEwen had a grocery store and he had a restaurant business, and he went into protection. He declared bankruptcy. Now he got unlucky. One of his biggest locations where he put a lot of money into for the store, Eataly, opened up down the block,
Oh,
and then it was in it was in a big office building slash residential. And of course, all the office people disappeared. So just a
yeah,
victim of bad timing. He's a great restaurateur and operator. Now, but what struck me was, and it's something you mentioned as well, is we don't really haven't heard a lot about retail bankruptcies. They've kind of gone quiet. Is this the calm
right.
before the storm, or what's happening here?
Unfortunately, I suspect it is. So there were quite a lot of retail bankruptcies even before the pandemic, and then the first year of the pandemic, we saw a pretty big uptick, both with big retailers like Penny's and Neiman Marcus and others, as well as small ones,
Okay.
and kind of the same, um, I guess, trend in store closings. But this interesting thing happened that instead of all the store closings that were predicted, I think we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Coresight predicted 25,000 store closings
Yeah.
last year, ended up being more like 8,000. Green Street Advisors predicted that half the mall anchors in the US would close within 2 years. And so we've got about 12 weeks for hundreds of stores to be shuttered. So I don't think that's very
No,
likely to
I don't think that's on
happen.
the horizon.
Um,
Yeah.
and then similarly, I think, the pace of bankruptcies has really slowed and it's surprised people. What I think is going on is two things. One, which is more perhaps profound perspective, is I do think one of the things that has happened by virtue of COVID is more retailers have come to appreciate the role of stores in all their business. The curbside pickup, the ship from
Mm,
store. So
mm,
so I think there is actually where the narrative, as we've talked about before, was well, online's growing and that really comes at the expense of physical retail. That is certainly sometimes true. But what's been true for a lot of retailers is that they actually need their physical stores to make digital work. So I think there is this realization, and that's kind of caused people to maybe tap on the brakes a little bit in terms of store closing. The thing that I think
yeah.
is more of a near term phenomenon is both the at least in the U.S. the amount of government stimulus that has propped
Right.
up spending, which will eventually be less of an issue. And then the second thing is, as we came into this year, a lot of the retailers that had terrible 2020s were starting to see improvement. And they were starting to, some of this again is a function of the stimulus, some of it's a function of pent up demand. And some of it is like, let's just see how this plays out. So I think there was a lot of the people, the banks or others that might have forced people, or landlords that might have forced people into protection. The ones that were already on the edge filed last year. The ones that are on the edge now,
Yeah.
I think it's more of a wait and see attitude.
Right.
So I suspect when we get into, and the holidays are coming up, back to school. So it's not a great time to try to force store closings or force bankruptcies. But we get on the other side, it'll be a little bit more clear who the winners and losers are. And we'll have, I think, a more normal perspective of what the retail trends look like.
Yeah, right on. I mean, and it's not unusual during our career over the years that Q1 is the time when retailers
Oh,
go into protection, right? I mean, A,
yes.
I didn't have a great holiday, so that was going to be my last savior. Or B, I
Right.
was kind of planning to do it anyway, but I might as well liquidate all my inventory, get through holiday, and then in Q1, wrap it up and
Yeah,
move on, kind of
I
thing.
haven't seen, like, I haven't gone out to look for it or particularly seen the stats as to the seasonality of
Mm,
store closings and bankruptcies. But yes, my general impression
yeah.
is 3/4 to 90% happen in the 2 or 3 months after the
Yeah.
holiday.
I do think under it's kind of a little bit of an iceberg. I bet I don't have data to back this up, but I think there's at the high level brands we know stable, but I think below that there's a lot of small indies who are declaring bankruptcy and or just throwing in the towel, right? Because I know here
Right.
in Canada, the tourism is, and it's the same. I was reading an article about Manhattan and Soho, right? 40 stores are vacant, which is unheard of in that
Yep.
shopping district. And if you run a business that survives on tourism or office workers,
Hmm.
you're probably, maybe you're a small indie. You probably either cashed your chips in, or I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and I think that's going to continue, unfortunately, because I don't think office
Yeah.
workers are going to come streaming back in January. So I think there's going to be a reckoning for sure. So it's a good thing for us to keep
Yeah.
our eyes on.
That's my sense, and it doesn't get as much visibility. The other thing that I think could be interesting and also unfortunate is with all these supply chain challenges, the retailers that are best positioned to, aside from just maybe strong balance sheets, but either control more of their own distribution or can afford to pay
Yeah.
premiums, those are the big retailers. So I think we'll see a disproportionate kind of pattern of success this holiday. It'll be more
Mm.
concentrated among the big retailers that can control their destiny more or absorb these premium prices. That's a lot harder for the smaller guys to withstand.
Yeah, yeah. And to manage through, let's talk about the supply pain. Very funny. Not the
Right.
supply chain, but
Yeah.
advantage to the big guys again. I mean, right back to the beginning, Best Buy's talking about one of the advantages, we have the stuff. Like and it's tough, right? If you're an indie, you're basically at the mercy of the vendors or the supply chain, whereas you're a big guy. Walmart just bought a boat and Home Depot's bought a boat, and you can have the wherewithal to bring stuff in. So this whole supply chain, very cleverly, the supply pain is just another thing that goes against the indies and the mid-sized business. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we have to give a shout out to our friends over at the Jason and Scott show. Last year, they coined the tip Shipageddon or term Shipageddon, and this year it's
Yeah.
hashtag supply pain. But yeah, it's the thing that's which also could be a whole episode. I think number one, it's just really. I mean, your point is right. I mean, there are people that are able to navigate this better fundamentally than others, and so they'll disproportionately benefit. The thing that is really, to me, is just kind of increasingly scary is it seems like just about every day over the last few weeks we have retailers or analysts or whatever pointing out just how bad the disruption
Yeah.
is and how difficult it's going to be to recover from this. I mean, something that I wasn't paying that much attention to, but just like the energy management policies in China, which are causing factories to be closed more. So even
Yeah.
if you kind of fix, there's throughout the whole supply chain, there's the production issues, Vietnam being closed as an example. There are the outbound port issues. There enough ships to carry the stuff? Then there's can you get the stuff off the ship? Then are there drivers to get it to? I mean, you just go through
Yeah.
every piece
Goes on and
of
on.
this.
Like, will,
Yeah,
will, will the ship anchor? Will the ship anchor hit a oil pipeline off the coast of California and cause a
yeah.
major
Just to
spill?
pick
Looks
a
like
crazy
that.
example. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's very frightening just in general how messed up the system is and
Mm.
what a lot of people are saying. I forget one of the big retailers. I think it may have been Doug McMillan at Walmart who said, they're not sure things are going to get back to normal in the supply chain until 2023. I mean, that's
Yeah.
so
My
yeah,
bet was
it's
2025. I was even
wow.
farther out. And not at this intensity, right? It's kind of like I've always said about COVID. Like, we won't always be here, but it'll be with us.
Yeah.
I think, if you look at some of these places like the entire continent of Africa, which won't even get vaccinated until the
Right.
end of 2023. Now, you may or may not source products from Africa, but it's a knock-on effect around the world, right?
Well,
Just
that's the
different
thing.
stuff
Right.
starts to happen.
Things are so interconnected. You may be able to get
Yeah.
one example I heard, which as soon as you hear it, you kind of go, well, that's obvious. But you may be fabricating, let's say whether it's an appliance or it's an iPhone or it's a fancy dress or whatever. Like you can't produce it unless you get all the pieces. So if one
Right.
part doesn't show
Labor.
up,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter that you have all the other parts, but the one doesn't show up, you can't do the finished product. So yeah, the ripple effects of this are really extreme. So going back to the episode we had a couple of weeks ago with Rod Sides from Deloitte, it's still kind of hard to get my head around the increases that a lot of the firms are predicting. I certainly think the consumer
Mhm.
demand in general is there. As we
Yeah.
talked about, inflation, you could have this weird thing where you have a 7-8% sales increase because the average unit retail went up 10%, either because people have raised prices or the trade up or, whatever the mix. So it's
Yep.
really, really an interesting time. And I think, unfortunately, it's going to stay pretty volatile for an extended period of time, at least for many sectors that
Yeah.
rely on overseas production.
In some ways, it's a tale of two cities because when I speak to the biggest of the big, and they're fine. Their
Yeah.
problem is where to put all the stuff. So they've been bringing it in for months. And again, this advantage to the big retailers with the financial wherewithal to like rent an entire warehouse to bring in stuff, 800 containers worth of stuff 3 months early. I mean,
Yeah.
they
Right.
have the stuff. And you know what? This is, we should move on, but this is a whole topic we should get some experts on because,
Yeah.
okay, can you near source? Not really. I mean, you just can't, a lot of this stuff can't come home. That's not the solution. And do you chase it around the world? And do you increase prices because you're bringing in more safety stock? I mean, it's a big, big issue.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And it's a
hard
whole
to.
episode. I think it's a whole
Yeah,
episode.
and I was saying to somebody the other day that I mean, I've been in retail long enough that I know something about supply chain, and we were talking
Mm,
about some sourcing issues when I was at Land's End because most of that product was produced overseas, and so I spent
hmm
more time working on that years ago. But I was like, I haven't had to think very much
Hasn't
about
changed that
supply
much. Hasn't
chain.
changed that much.
No, it hasn't.
Hasn't
But I
changed
thought,
that much.
of all the things that I've been focused on, in my writing, speaking, working with clients or whatever, it's more business design, marketing, data analytics. All those things have been for technology more broadly. And now
Mm,
it's like, well, what about ships and what about Long Beach,
containers and
California, which I've driven through, but like, oh, I didn't realize that like this was the
yep.
bottleneck or
Yeah.
Rotterdam, or like all these places are like suddenly
Yeah.
become. I don't know that they're hot tourist destinations, but they're become cities we're talking about because of this crazy supply chain thing.
Well, we've had a long discussion about a lot of things without and a notable absence. We haven't mentioned the word Amazon yet, so we can't have an episode without saying something about Amazon. Last last words go to Amazon. They seem to have launched Black Friday ready deals or something. What are we, 50 days, 50 plus days out from Black Friday? What's going on here? What are they doing?
Well, I think we talked about this last week as Target kind of jump started the holiday. And so I believe I don't like to be in the predictions business so much, but I think I said last week, well, if Target's out there October 11th or
Right.
whatever, then it's just a matter of time before other big retailers start to follow. So yeah, Amazon is talking about their early Black Friday deals. My guess is by the time this episode airs, Walmart, Best Buy, and others will probably be out there
Right.
with some sort of deals. So again, I think this circles back a little bit to the supply chain issue, which is if you're worried you're not going to have the product, or the consumer psychology starts to become, oh, I better shop early or I'm going to miss out. Then as a retailer, you want to be out there and try to get your disproportionate share of the spending. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be,
Mm-hmm.
everything's going to be moved up, whether it needs to be or not. And there is some speculation that there are going to be some other kind of special shopping days. So to not put as much pressure on Black Friday,
Right.
Cyber Monday, retailers will be creating their own. I think we talked about this last year. Is like, why doesn't Target or Walmart have kind of their own Prime Day or Singles
Yep.
Day kind of event to make it a little bit more proprietary? So this may be a step in,
Yep.
or well, Amazon's doing its thing, but I think retailers will end up probably going. The big ones will go
Do their thing.
head to head.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about Rent the Runway. Another IPO following, Warby Parker, a bunch of other folks doing IPOs. What are your thoughts on Rent the Runway?
Well, number one, I do think this there's this IPO boom, companies rushing to the markets. I guess because the valuations are so frothy, and a number of these businesses have certainly been around for a while, and some of their investors, I'm sure, are looking to take some money off the table. So Rent the Runway, which is one of the more, I guess, high profile Disruptor Brands just filed, and I'm going to be like a broken record on this. The thing that has really struck me with these IPOs is these businesses are much smaller than I assumed they were. Rent the Runway doesn't even do a couple $100 million a year in total revenue, which is, kind of the sales of one really good department store. Like that's not a massive business. The really interesting thing is how much money they lose. They lost more money last year than they made in revenue, which is pretty impressive. I mean, a negative, 115% operating margin. Now, again, the argument is always you got to make these investments. And certainly compared to Warby Parker, they were in they're in the fashion business. They're in much more of the special event, wear to work kind of clothing. So they absolutely got hit hard by COVID. So it's a little bit hard to extrapolate from their last 5-6 quarters of business what this is going to look like. But as an investment, I mean, you wouldn't normally go to market with a negative sales trajectory, basically, and mounting losses. And our buddy Dan McCarthy, maybe we'll put the link in the show notes. Our buddy Dan McCarthy took a look at some of their churn rates, and they didn't look super healthy. So it's interesting timing for a business where the fundamentals either are very hard to understand or they don't look good. So it's just a parade of these brands going to market. I keep calling it profitless prosperity, right? Like, everybody's so excited. Look at these great brands. And then you look under the covers and it's like, well, they're basically lighting a big pile of cash on fire every month. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes. I suspect this is going to be a more challenging one than the Warby deal.
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting because the this idea of a story stock versus a performance stock, right? And rent, the whole resale rent economy piece has got a big tailwind just from a notional cultural perspective.
Sure,
and it just boy, as you said, you look at the numbers. It's not a performance stock. Let's just put it that way.
No.
Right. It is a story stock. The story is the bet that resale and rent will be bigger than fast fashion in 10 years, as they say.
And they're clearly, to their credit, they're clearly the leader. They've I think developed a pretty well-known brand, and they've been at this a while. So in terms of building the infrastructure, making some adjustments to their business model, they had opened some stores or showrooms, I guess you'd say. They've closed those. I suspect they may get back into that. That may be some of the reason they're trying to raise this money. So, there's some interesting things there for sure. I don't mean to dump all over it, but this pattern of these brands that seem like they're just killing it, both from a revenue side and kind of share a market, they're still pretty tiny businesses.
Yeah. Well, listen, it adds to another part of this rich retail palette that we get to discuss.
The rich tapestry.
Never a dull day. The rich tapestry, exactly. Never a dull day. Well, that's a good wrap on the news of the week. Once again, reminder to anyone who's listening to go check us out on YouTube, and anyone who's watching on YouTube, the extended version, because we chat for a while. So the bonus content that's on YouTube. Be sure and subscribe and follow us on the podcast. And I just wanted to give a shout out to my friends at Google, who just sent me their new Nest Cam. Very shameless self-promotion, because I'm going to put it on my new barbecue channel. So if anybody out there listening to our show likes barbecuing, I've got a new show called Last Request Barbecue, which I'm just cooking, which is just a pile of fun. Steve, you and I have talked about whenever we have the opportunity, you and I are heading to Austin to do some barbecue. So
hey, I'm available.
All right.
We do a live show, cross promotion.
we do a live show standing in line at Franklin's to kill 5 or 6 hours as we're standing in line.
Right, that'll make the time go faster.
All right, well, let's get on with the rest of the show. The back half of the show, we got Robbie Kelman-Baxter talking about subscriptions, and it's a wonderful interview, so let's have a listen.